Hey everybody, welcome to today's Firelight Chat. I'm very excited to introduce you to a gentleman named Jon Swan. Jon is the founder of Save Forest Lake, which is dedicated to stopping an unwanted, unneeded landfill development next to Forest Lake and the state park in Dalton, New Hampshire, one of the most beautiful areas in the state. He works with environmental organizations throughout New Hampshire to strengthen environmental regulations and to coordinate efforts and raise awareness of threats to the environment and natural resources posed by companies drawn to New Hampshire specifically because of their lax environmental protections. You can follow him on X at Save Forest Lake 1, and you can learn more about him at his website, saveforestlake.com. Jon Swan, thank you so much for being here.
Marianne, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm very
And
honored.
thank you for your Thank you. I'm honored as well by your endorsement of my campaign. Obviously, we're on the same wavelength. And I think that your work, it's what's happening with Forest Lake is such a microcosm of what's happening in the country. And that's why I thought by your explaining to us specifically what's happening there and then extrapolating from that and telling us how you see the whole environmental movement would be very helpful. Before we get started on the specifics, though, I think your story is very interesting. So if you could give us a little bit of information about how you came to this.
Well, goodness, where to start? Sometimes I feel like I'm living in the world according to Garp, part two or chapter two, because I don't know. Maybe it's just my crazy upbringing in Canton, Ohio. I had a very dysfunctional family life, as a lot of people do, but I was able to escape thanks to a sister in Texas, and found myself at home in the great state of Texas. But it got to a point where things were getting warmer. The situation in Texas, and especially in Austin, where I lived, every year the drought conditions were getting worse and worse. So it is kind of ironic that in the late 90s, I was paying attention to some of the water woes facing, here in America, in the great state of Texas. So I decided to move to upstate New York, and really enjoyed life in upstate. Beautiful. Again, love the environment. And after 9/11, I decided I was drawn to join the military and do my part for our country, answer that patriotic call to support our country. So I joined the Army Reserves at 39 and ultimately deployed to Iraq in 2008, 2009. And met a lot of great people in Iraq. To me, I found them to be just like us, wanting to, make a living, live in peace. And they were thankful for, in essence, the freedom that we were able to bring to them. They were thankful that Saddam Hussein was gone. Let's put it that way. However, I do feel like we overstayed, and I won't get into all that, but basically, I came home and realized that I started paying attention to what was going on around me in the world. And ultimately, I wound up in beautiful New Hampshire, the North Country of New Hampshire, where, live free or die. And, no state income tax, no sales tax. And I thought, great, we found a beautiful property near Forest Lake in Dalton, New Hampshire. And next thing I know, a couple of years later, we learn about a waste company that was operating a landfill in neighboring Bethlehem. In fact, when we moved here, my wife said we're not moving to Bethlehem because there's a landfill, an ongoing controversy surrounding that, and we don't want any part of that. So we found ourselves near Forest Lake in the state park. Love the lake. We're not on the water. We're not, we're removed from it. But when I learned about this in 2019, first thing I said was, are you joking? Who would want to site a landfill next to a beautiful lake and state park? And that's what's ultimately happening. So very early on in, March, April 2019, I formed Save Forest Lake as a result. And since then, we're going on nearly 5 years now of trying to fight off this corporate predator is how I describe them. And I will preface this by saying all of this, of course, is in my opinion. I've had to learn to be very cautious with what I say because I am in the midst of an ongoing 4-year lawsuit with this company, first over defamation, and then we settled that. And then they did not like the news story that came out about the settlement. And they have since, in essence, reinitiated their actions against me. We don't have anti-SLAPP laws in New Hampshire, so about $140,000 later, I'm still fighting this waste company in the courts as well as um, in Concord in the halls of the State House and at the Department of Environmental Services, who I sometimes refer to them as a Department of Environmental Sellouts because they are. I've learned in this almost 5 years of trying to fight off this unwanted, unneeded landfill development. The Department of Environmental Services is not on our side. Just as I've learned in doing my research about the same corporation's 30-year history in the neighboring town of Bethlehem and the overwhelming opposition they have had to each expansion by the people, yet the Department of Environmental Services and high-level politicians in Concord have sided with industry over the people. So we do have an uphill fight, but I am very optimistic because we do have statewide support for our efforts to protect and preserve our environment and our natural resources from continued degradation and exploitation by industry, especially this corporation.
So what's happening in New Hampshire is what's happening in too many ways all over the country, and not only in the issue of the environment, but this awful way. On one hand, like you said, you have these corporate predators, and then you have these governmental agencies which theoretically exist to advocate for the people against overreach by these corporate forces. And yet here you have, because of the corruption and because of, I want you to tell me why, you have the government actually doing more to advocate for the industrial force, which is harming land or people, than for the people themselves. What are they getting out of it?
Well, on the, I guess the powers that be in Concord at DES and in the halls of the State House, I've made calls to the Federal Bureau of Investigation to look into the bank accounts of these people because, as everyone will tell you when we talk about this, what is the motivation? Why would Governor Sununu veto legislation that passed overwhelmingly in both the House and the Senate, which would kill this project and help protect water bodies in the state of New Hampshire from harmful industry? And yet we overrode the veto in the House by a vote of 80% in support of the veto override, and we lost in the Senate by a mere 5 votes. So, and again, led by a few people of power to defeat an initiative led by the citizens of the state who are crying for help. Initially I wrote to Governor Sununu many times, asking Governor Sununu to help us, to help us protect our beautiful lake, our state park, our property rights. We've been here. These are, again, I don't live on the lake, but these are people, these are families who have lived here for generations on this beautiful, serene lake. And it happens to be one of the cleanest bodies of water in the state. Beautiful setting, overlooking the presidential mountains. People get married there at the Free Public State Park Beach. Who in their right mind would think it's okay to site a mega landfill that would be home to millions of tons of out-of-state trash trucked south to north into northern New Hampshire, where everybody comes to vacation, to sightsee, to take in the shopping in the quaint towns of Littleton. Again, it's profit. There's got to be something going on behind the scenes that has corrupted the powers that be that could very easily weigh in and stop this. I finally had the opportunity to run into Governor Sununu at an executive council meeting a few years ago, And I introduced myself and I asked him for our help. And he looked at me and he goes, "What do you want me to do about it?" And yet, a couple of years later, after the invasion of Ukraine, he issued an executive order to remove Russian vodka from the shelves of the New Hampshire state liquor stores. So obviously, Governor Sununu could do something about this. And again, he ultimately vetoed a bill that would stop this dangerous
So
development.
what did when he vetoed the bill, like you said, it had gotten overwhelming bipartisan support. What did he say at the time was the reason for his veto?
It's crazy. And I have video of this. He was interviewed on WMUR talking about it, and he used industry talking points. He mentioned that waste disposal costs throughout the state would skyrocket for municipalities, which is we've debunked that. In fact, New Hampshire has enough landfill capacity for the state currently through 2034, and with expansions at a few other commercial landfills, there's capacity beyond that. So again, we've also focused on reducing what we waste as a society, because we have to look at what we're throwing away, our single-use consumption. And it's really impacted my life here at home. We go through and we look at what we do as consumers, because we've realized that our practices, we've been lulled into this false sense of, the resources of the world are endless, and that's not true at all. I mean, look at how ridiculous it is that now everybody relies on bottled water. Do you remember when bottled water was first being marketed? And everybody laughed. It was like, why would you buy water when it's free at your tap? And now we're in a fight to protect our private drinking wells, our water sources, from PFAS contamination that we know will come with a landfill sited in a green space in an area where we have tested in the vicinity around the site. We've tested the water. We've tested Forest Lake. We've tested Alderbrook, where the wetlands that surround the site for this landfill drain into the Ammonoosuc River. Alderbrook is free of PFAS contaminants. Forest Lake is pristine, not only from PFAS contaminants, but others as well, especially, including E. coli. And we want to fight and protect this and our private wells. We have taken the effort and expense of testing our wells for PFAS contaminants, and all of our well water is clean. There's no detectable levels for PFAS. And yet when you go, and I've done the research, I've looked at the reports, and I've even waded into the Ammonoosuc, and I've taken samples of surface water runoff from the neighboring NCS landfill that's operated by the same company for 30 years. And the lab reports for that water that I collected as it cascaded into the Ammonoosuc tested detections for 4 PFAS contaminants, including PFOA, which is going to be probably deemed a hazardous compound by the EPA in 2024. And the Department of Environmental Services is poo-pooing my efforts and my results, in essence saying they're going to continue to monitor. And when they should shut that facility down instead of allowing it to continue to take in waste. And we've already, like I said, we've proven that we don't need that landfill nor its capacity. And the permit applications that are being submitted right now, which we're reviewing for this new landfill, they are seeking a permitted capacity of 456,000 tons of waste per year, which is 2.5 times the waste intake at that landfill in Bethlehem in 2022. 2.5 times. Our waste growth in terms of what we're landfilling in New Hampshire is flat. So that extra capacity is going to come from out of state. And yet we're having to fight the Department of Environmental Services, Governor Sununu, and leadership in the House and the Senate to stop this landfill project, this unneeded and unwanted landfill development. And again, it's profit over people, and they're willing to risk our health, our safety with PFAS contaminants, an influx of heavy-duty truck traffic on our quiet, rural country roads that are already dangerous enough. And it's mind-boggling to think that
So,
citizens are having to fight this.
so when you called the FBI and you said, check this out, because there's some level of corruption somewhere. I'm not saying there's economic corruption. I don't know. But when you were asked and you said, would you check this out? What kind of response did you get?
In essence, I called the New England office in Boston several times. Each instance where things happened in Dalton, in Concord, and again, I'll document a lot of this on my website and on YouTube on SaveForestLake.com and on the Save Forest Lake YouTube channel. I document everything. Anytime I'm out in public and there's an opportunity to interact with whether it's Casella Waste Systems, politicians, local officials, et cetera, and of course, advocates for the landfill development, whom we have learned through a Boston Globe report that at least one advocate in the town is being paid by Casella to advocate. And where there's smoke, there's fire. So again, when I contacted the FBI and asked them to start looking into this, because again, with the volume of waste that would be trucked in to this landfill development, by the way, the initial concept one, the initial plan called for a 238 acre landfill footprint. And with the volume being sought, this would be an over 100-year permitted life capacity landfill. That means generations of North Country residents would have to suffer through waste being trucked in from out of state by this corporation because Massachusetts has decided not to build new landfills for their waste. Maine has gone to a state-owned structure for landfilling. And by the way, if you research Casella in Maine, they have fought against that. They found loopholes. They brought in construction debris from Massachusetts into Maine against the wishes of the people of Maine. Even in New York State right now, they are trying to purchase, or not purchase, but trying to find a way into the Madison County landfill, which is a county run and in essence used by the county of Madison in New York by Syracuse for their waste. It has about 100-year capacity, give or take. And right now, the board of selectmen or whomever in Madison County have tabled a decision relative to, in essence, partner with Casella because they have realized that 100-year life capacity would be reduced to 25-year capacity by working with Casella because waste would be brought in from out of the county. So check out what's happening in Thurston, New York, where the people of Thurston, New York are fighting Casella's sneaky attempt to buy a sludge company, a sludge development, about 2,700 acres where they want to bring in sludge. They've been bringing in sludge to spread. They've tested. There's PFAS contamination. Casella tried to sneak in to buy that operation to continue the waste, the spreading of waste, the sludge, which recent testing by Sierra Club has revealed PFAS in the soil and in the water. Again, it's madness to think that we're having to fight our own
Right.
regulators and officials against this corporation. Again, this is my opinion based
I
on my
understand.
research and my
I
experience.
understand. I understand. Where is this waste coming from?
Well, in Bethlehem, that facility historically, I would say about 34% of it is trucked in from out of state. Those are the numbers. Because of the last expansion, the stage 6 expansion, because again, the town of Bethlehem has fought expansion there, so they couldn't go outward. They had legal agreements where they actually said they would not buy adjacent land to grow the landfill. And then they turn around and they, in essence, violated that agreement by buying 100 acres next door. And yet the citizens have still fought that. So what they've done in Bethlehem is they've expanded upward, building waste cells upon waste cells. And now they're at a point where they're running out of space. So that landfill will close by 2026. So only recently have they shown restraint. And most of that waste from Massachusetts, we believe, is being trucked to one of their 5 landfills in New York State. So what's happening now is they see this landfill development in Dalton next to Forest Lake as relieving that pressure in terms of where this waste that they collect, that they have routes in Massachusetts, and now they've expanded into Connecticut. And again, Connecticut has done the same thing. They closed the Myra incinerator in Hartford in 2022. So Connecticut is also exporting waste. And so where's that waste going to go? It's either going to get trucked to New York State or it's going to come to northern New Hampshire. So that's what we're fighting against. There's a lot of money involved, and that's why I reached out to the FBI to try and peek behind the curtain, because we can't. I mean, of course, you can look at the corporate donor page.
I understand. So what kind of response did you get from the FBI?
They basically took my comments on several calls. I will say, actually, the last time I called, I was able to speak for a little bit, and then they hung up on me. They hung up on me. So
you were in the middle of a conversation about it, and they hung up on you.
They hung up on me.
So New Hampshire is not the only state where there are citizens trying to fight this stuff. You mentioned Connecticut, you mentioned Maine, you mentioned New York, and this is a kind of national, there's almost like a network throughout the country of people who are going through these things, right?
Well,
now,
look at the train accident in Ohio. Look what happened there. You know, I mean, it's amazing. And believe me, we've reached out to, if you have any Hollywood celebrity supporters who would be interested in our fight, because this will ultimately be a great movie. I will write a book about this because I've done the research. But we would love to get Hollywood here because we need help.
So let me ask you a question. You've got the Department of Environmental Services in New Hampshire. They're not helping you. As a matter of fact, they're seeking to block any such efforts as yours. What about the EPA? What about the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington? Where are they?
That's really funny. Thanks for, you kind of made me cough and laugh. But when I discovered that because again, based on the groundwater reports I was reading that were being submitted by Casella and their engineering firm to DES since 2017, I started looking back this year at these reports. The narrative that was being sold to the regulator, DES, didn't match the data. These groundwater monitoring wells that surround the landfill to detect any contamination that's coming from the landfill outside of the liner. And again, this is up gradient of the Ammonoosuc River. I detail this all on my website, Save Forest Lake. The data doesn't match the narrative. And it's a continued narrative of, well, it's the old unlined landfill. It's residual impacts that were in the soil. And so we'll continue to monitor. And then DES says, continue to monitor. We'll look at the next triennial.
Yeah, that's a big one in government. We're monitoring the situation. They use that.
And so what I've done is I've looked at, and they actually, the nice thing is that they actually show for you the results for all the different contaminants, whatever they're testing for. And I'm looking at this again as a newcomer. I'm looking at this in 2023, and I see the data. And these wells, especially the ones that are getting closer and closer to the Ammonoosuc River, they keep getting higher and higher for PFAS contamination and even exceeding ambient groundwater quality standards. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, these new wells that you actually asked them to put in because the wells up gradient keep testing hot, like a drunk driver at a checkpoint, these new ones are testing hot and they're only 400 feet from the river. So that's when I drew a line through the wells and I said, I'm going to go to that point on the river. And I'm going to look and see if I can find any surface water coming off. And I want to test that. So in October, I waded into the Ammonoosuc River. I also did this in September at a different point. And both of my lab reports came back with detections for the same 4 PFAS compounds, including PFOA. And then what I did was I through a 91A right to know request, I got the lab reports for PFAS for the leachate that is trucked to the Franklin and Concord wastewater treatment plants. I got those. And again, this is almost like CSI meets Aaron Brockovich.
I
And
know.
I,
I
and
was
I,
thinking Aaron Brockovich before.
and I profiled each PFAS compound. The top four, actually really the top six PFAS compounds in the leachate that is that's being trucked and then ultimately goes through the wastewater treatment plants and then empties with the effluent into the Merrimack River, where they can't really treat for PFAS removal. The same top six PFAS compounds were the top six showing up at these groundwater monitoring wells close to the Ammonoosuc River. So then guess which top four PFAS contaminants found in the leachate showed up in my testing of the surface water runoff going into the Ammonoosuc River,
The same
including
four.
PFOA. The same four. So it's like a
Have you,
fingerprint. It's a profile. And
you,
DES
you
is poo-pooing that. And the EPA, so getting back to your question, I've reached out to the EPA and they keep telling me this is something that New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services should be checking into. So they keep punting it back to DES. And I keep trying to tell EPA that leadership at DES, who you keep sending me back to, is the problem. I'm connecting the
you know
dots, just like 9/11. And guess what? No one's paying attention.
you mentioned before Erin Brockovich. Have you sent this to her?
I have reached out to everyone from Leonardo DiCaprio to,
He was on my mind as well.
Aaron Brockovich, Robert Kennedy Jr., you name it. I mean, everybody. I'm probably getting ready to write to the UN at some point in my free time, but I don't really have much free time, kind of like you, when we're trying to address what we both see as wrongs,
How about
you can
60
find yourself
minutes?
overwhelmed at times.
How about 60 minutes?
I ping them on my tweets. I do a lot of times when I send out these massive emails, and believe me, I copy, I CC people, news agencies, Boston Globe, New York Times, Huffington Post, CNN, MSNBC. We get a lot of great local coverage here in New Hampshire. And again, this is all documented on my website and on my Forest Lake YouTube page, including the news stories that run. But beyond that, the Boston Globe has picked up some of our. They've kind of focused on kind of the ugliness of this issue because again, this company, Casella Waste Systems, and again, this is my opinion, but they have found some supporters in our town, which to me, I believe equates to an environmental justice issue because Dalton is one of the poorest towns in the state of New Hampshire. And they're floating this $2 million payday every year to the town to help offset property taxes. So there's a small group of people who sadly have never left the North Country of New Hampshire. So they don't appreciate what we have here in this. I mean, we moved here. I've lived in Austin, Texas. I lived in upstate New York. I lived in Canton, Ohio. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Kuwait. I've been to other places in the country where we have something so special here, but they don't
Yeah.
realize that. And then they accuse those of us who are fighting this landfill development of being outsiders coming in and trying to make New Hampshire what we escaped from, which is totally the
Yeah.
opposite. We want to
I
prevent
understand.
the influx of heavy duty traffic and pollution.
Yeah,
If
I
you go to
understand.
Forest Lake, at 7 a.m. in the morning, you can't hear a thing. And yet, what do you think is going to happen when landfill operations
Trucks.
start 2,500 feet away and you hear that beep, beep of trucks backing up and then the clank, clank as they dump their load. And then it sounds like a roller coaster when you hear a landfill, the roller coaster going up the tracks as the tractor's compacting. You're going to hear all that. And are you going to take your
Well,
family swimming at Forest Lake State Park when you know there's an operating landfill nearby? No, of course not.
well,
And the
you know,
winds blow in that direction.
I would think Granite Staters would be more sensitive to the idea of PFAS after what happened with Merrimack, New Hampshire. The cancer rates, the first time I ever heard about PFAS, it was in New Hampshire. I thought at that time naively that it was sort of a New Hampshire issue as opposed to everyone else. Today it's 46% of all urban wells. Are people not realizing that the terrible disease quotient that is associated with those compounds?
Yes, in fact, thank you for bringing that up because, and I know sometimes I go down into some deep holes when I'm talking because I have a lot to share. But early on, I reached out to what we call the water warriors of Merrimack, New Hampshire: Nancy Murphy, Wendy Thomas, Lorene Allen. We've reached out to those folks and we've supported them and they have supported us in our fight. So, yes, we've definitely tied the whole PFAS fight to our fight. And um, sadly, again, should be a no-brainer. We're trying to protect our North Country way of life, our tourism industry. Tourism and outdoor recreation are our bread and butter up here. And yet the powers that be that we're fighting here seem to have no problem with allowing a private waste corporation from Vermont to sacrifice this beautiful state park. And frankly, this truck traffic is going to go through the serene, peaceful town of Littleton, Bethlehem, Whitefield, and Twin Mountain,
And then what's
Carroll.
going to happen? Are people then going to say, oh, we didn't know it was going to be this? Is that what's going to happen?
Well, when I started this almost 5 years ago, I told my wife, I said, I don't want anyone saying we didn't know anything about this. So we have statewide support, Marianne.
Well, like you said, it was a bipartisan bill that wanted to turn it down. It was the veto on the part of the governor.
we
And what
have
did he say? You said he was giving talking points from the waste management company. So he said that otherwise your own costs would skyrocket. What else did he say? And you already said that that's not correct. What else did he say is an excuse?
that's really it in essence. I mean, he bought into this company. We found out because, again, people who live in other parts of the state would send us, whether it's video or meeting minutes from their own town select board meetings, where this corporation, they would send their developer of landfill, their manager of landfill development. We have video of him. He would go to the select board meetings and he was pitching this crisis. He was saying, we need your help to support our efforts to get this landfill sited in Dalton, or we need your help to contact your state representatives to defeat this piece of legislation, because then our state, your town's waste disposal costs will skyrocket. And they used buzzwords like crisis. And, again, we've debunked all that because, and again, one thing that was happening here in New Hampshire, our state solid waste plan hadn't been updated since 2003. So when we got involved in this fight, and we have a lot of great supporters across the state, we have a lot of smart people involved in this. We took a look at things and we said, DES, how can you get to where you said you wanted to be in 2003 when you haven't updated your map? And by law, it was supposed to be updated every, I want to say 9 or 10 years. I can't remember, but it hadn't been updated. So they finally updated it in 2022. So, again, we've had to hold the regulators and party leadership officials, elected officials, their feet to the fire. And, we're being very successful. That's why I'm optimistic we're going to win. But I'm also very angry, Marianne, that it's taken 5 years of my life and others to do something which should have been common sense a long time ago. And it's that profit over people. Sadly.
So wait a minute, I'm a little confused. The land, it has or has not been built yet. It has to some extent.
They don't even own the property yet.
Well, then where is the contamination coming from that you tested for?
That's at the Bethlehem landfill. That's the one that's next door.
The Bethlehem landfill. Okay.
That's 6 miles away.
When you said, right. So when you said that you feel you're going to be successful, you feel you're going to be successful at obstructing this?
Yes, we will stop this.
Well,
we will stop this.
But hold on. How will you be able to, given the fact that the governor has already vetoed the bill? How are you going to stop it now?
Well, again, forward progress. We continue to get supporters. We continue to. We have a lot of legislators in the House now who
Okay.
support us and are smart. They
Yeah.
wake up and they realize,
Okay.
they get very angry when they realize how much out-of-state waste is being trucked into our beautiful state.
Right.
So
Right.
we have support. We have people who realize they're like, wait a minute, this is going to impact my
Right.
quality of life. This is going to impact
So,
my family home.
right. So right now, when is the proposed project set to begin?
Well, they've resubmitted permit applications, so that's actually what I'm really focused on right now in going through the applications. They withdrew their permit applications a couple years ago because, again, overwhelming opposition, the amount of wetlands destruction. Because, again, keep in mind, they don't even own the property yet. They're gonna
Okay.
close on the land. It's about 1,900 acres of land that's under contract. They're going to
Right.
close on at least a portion of that when they obtain the permits. And DES is allowing this, even though we've realized there's conflicting rules because to be a solid waste operator and run a landfill and build a landfill, you also have to be the owner. But right now they're trying to play games with the land because, long
Okay.
story short, but basically we're talking about forested greenland habitat and wetlands that are going to be destroyed to build this new landfill that's unneeded, unwanted,
No,
about
I understand.
2,500 feet from Forest Lake,
Right. Right.
and in an area where we've already established baselines for no PFAS contamination. So I think
Right.
ultimately we're going to have to win, or and the state is going to permit something that is going to be proven detrimental to our health
Okay.
and safety.
So let me just ask these questions. How many feet from the lake did you say?
It's about 2,500, 2,700 feet from the
Okay.
water's edge.
So if all went according to plan for them with not only the permits but the purchase of the land, about what year would they be starting to build this?
They're estimating around 2027, 2028.
Okay.
And with
So
that, go ahead.
Well, so what you submit is that with all of the accumulated activation of public awareness around this, that we can stop this before anything begins to be built in 2027, right?
We will. Time is on our side. And not
Yeah,
only,
this is
again,
fantastic.
not only, I mean, we have a lot of passionate people who are very smart and are dedicated, and a lot of organizations that we partnered up with. So
Right,
we've built an army. We need more help, though. We need,
right.
again, Hollywood, please, if your Hollywood supporters are out there, we'd love to work with you. Come to Forest Lake and see the beauty. And Marianne, we want you in January
I
when you
would
come
love to.
back. Come to Forest Lake. We want to
I
show
would
you.
love to.
We want to show you the beauty of what we're fighting for.
I want
But
to. I
not
totally
only,
want to.
go ahead.
Let's definitely set that up with Wendy. I will have her talk to you. I would love to come out there and I would love to do some talking about it. And absolutely, I will.
And,
Um,
and if I can
so,
just, one last thing, I just want to
yes,
say, the reason why I think we are going to win, I know we're going to win. We have to win. There is no other alternative. We can't afford to lose, first of all. But second, we have so many arrows in the quiver, as we like to say, because there has been so much, whether it's malfeasance, um, shenanigans. We feel that we have built a solid legal case, not only against this company and its efforts to build this and what they've done behind the scenes, but also against the state of New Hampshire itself, because they are threatening our property rights. And they're not going, if they ultimately allow this to be built, they are not giving us any recourse under the Constitution to address these wrongs.
this is just good old boy stuff that we sort of thought we had evolved past, at least on the level that it is now occurring. So I just want to wrap this up with people understanding. The combination of governmental and corporate power is in a predatory way destroying land and potentially health, right, and safety of the citizens of New Hampshire. And citizens, led in large part by you, are fighting back. Okay. Do you agree that that's a microcosm of things going on in this country sort of in a bigger way that have to do not only with landfill, but with other environmental issues around this country?
100%. I can't tell you how many
Okay.
other groups we've reached out to and are working with
Right.
to share
Right.
information. We
Right.
many similar plights. Exactly.
Right, right.
Exactly.
And I asked you before we came on, do you feel optimistic? You said yes, and I assume that your optimism is based on the fact that there is such activation, such increased consciousness, not only in terms of citizens, but also in terms of organizational excellence and efficacy to counter this, correct?
Correct. But
All
it's
right.
not easy. It's not
No,
easy.
it's
It
not.
takes a lot
No,
of work, a lot
what
of
do they
loss of
say? You can't.
sleep. It's a lot of work. And as you know, you're on the campaign trail. I mean, bless your heart. I mean, everything you've gone through, and you're trying to do the right thing, and you're trying
So
to
much of
help make things better.
So much of what you said, reminded me of my own personal experience, and including not only the incredible institutional resistance of that predatory economic power and its marriage to government, but also the reticence of people to get, no, I'm on your side. I'm trying to change this. And we're living in an incredible moment. I think it's going to sort of fall one way or the other, either in the direction of the great social enlightenment and people understanding that we must begin a new chapter of our history which reflects much greater alignment with nature and with really the better angels of our nature in terms of how we treat the earth, how we treat each other, to, for the sake of monetary gain, be putting PFAS in the water when we know the incredible biological hazard that is involved there. It's insane. It's simply insane. But there are people like yourself, Jon, and so many people around the country who are saying, no, we're not going to do it. Now, you said in this particular case, time is on our side. In many cases, time doesn't seem to be on our side, but I'm so glad it's on your side in terms of this particular landfill in Dalton, in Forest Lake. So I have such admiration for you, and your leadership is so inspiring and important, and I want you to tell people everything that people not only in New Hampshire could do to be of support, but tell people what they could do even if they're not in New Hampshire, to be involved in the larger effort.
I would just invite people to visit my website, saveforestlake.com. And again, we've every instance where we've had, whether it's legislation, weighing in on certain permits, we've had people write from across the country, whether they vacation in New Hampshire, have family in New Hampshire, but people are waking up and realizing that this can't continue, especially with the proliferation of PFAS. People have to wake up. I can't tell you, Marianne, I'm sure you see this on the campaign trail, how many people I've spoken to who just don't seem to be paying attention to what's going on. And people have to wake up because, I mean, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a graduate of the University of Texas, and I was a history teacher in Austin for 5 years. And history, we learn a lot from history. And sadly, I almost feel we're in very dangerous times right now because we're kind of falling into that pattern of behavior where people are not paying attention, and the folks who are looking out for their own interests at our expense, they'll seize advantage of that. So we have to
Well,
wake up.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I myself was born and raised in Houston. And Texas has been embodying that struggle for decades now in a really dramatic way and continues to. We see it all over the country. And it's not always as dramatic as it is in Texas. But we'll see. We're sort of teetering right now. It's going to fall, like I said, it's going to fall one way or the other. And I also agree with you that a knowledge of history, that's why it's so important that we teach our children history. It's why it's so important that we learn it, so important that we heed its lessons, because you're right, you know, as they say, those who don't learn it are doomed to repeat it. Well,
They're very trying times right now, and you know, I can understand why some folks. I mean, look at it. No one even makes eye contact anymore. Everybody's looking at their cell phones, and we need to reconnect as a society. And I will say, you know, I think you'll appreciate this because I want you to know I read your book in around 1994, 1995, and it helped me as a young
Oh,
man grow. But I want to let you
thank
know that
you. Thank
this
you.
landfill flight, one thing we've realized, there's a silver lining to it. We've connected as a community in the North Country where people whose paths would have never crossed,
Oh, that's really something.
we've fallen in love with each other.
That's that is so beautiful, and that says it all. Um, there's a line in the Bible: "What man intends for evil, God intends for good." That, you know, it's kind of like in the yin and the yang symbol of the black and the white paisley shape, and then in each one there is a circle in the center. That in the light there's always a potential for darkness, and in the darkness there's always a potential for light. So thank you for being the potential for lights in this particular issue, but also by so doing, exemplifying the larger example of what it means to stand up for our children and our children's children and the beauty of the earth and the safety of living beings. I'm so glad to have met you. I'm so grateful for your support. I'm so grateful that we see in one another. We're in that same tribe of consciousness of so many people in New Hampshire and around the world, not only in this country, but around the world, who truly are standing for a better way and a turnaround before it's too late. So thank you, Jon Swan. Thank you so much.
Marianne, thank you. It was an honor.
And I'll see you up there. I'll see you in January.
Thank you.